With me. Okay, there we go. All right, what I'm gonna like I said, I'm gonna jump right into it and basically get into the content that I want to cover that surprisingly is something that is really, really almost all the stuff that I go through because I've been studying personal development for I guess the better part of 30 years. So, the crazy thing is most of the stuff that I've been studying, and if anybody gets into studying personal development, basically you're going to find a lot of fundamentals, a lot of really basic things, which is ultimately how anybody who has ever achieved massive success in life, it's how it's accomplished. It really comes down to persistence. It really comes down to consistency. If you could break it down to one word, it's consistency. And if a person can focus on mastering one thing, ultimately what you want to focus on is consistency. And I say this all the time. I'd be willing to bet if I went through my recordings, it probably comes up in every recording. And for me, anybody who knows me knows that I journal uh, consistently. And it's something that is just, it's kind of like people brushing their teeth. It's just what you do. You start off by listing things that you're grateful for, which I feel sorry for people that don't do that because ultimately it sets your state of mind. But then you also write down goals, which is a little bit of part of what I'm going to talk about tonight, which I think is critically important. And you have to be in a position to where you think bigger. That's just the way it is. You have to think bigger because the only limit to what you can accomplish in your life is your imagination and your level of commitment to making it real. But the reality is that any goal, no matter how huge it is, I don't care if it's a physical goal, if it's a financial goal, if it's a spiritual goal, if it's a social goal, ultimately it boils down to its smallest component. It's like, what is the next step? Yesterday is gone. This is the repeated part that I was talking about. Okay, yesterday's gone, and tomorrow is promised to nobody. Doesn't matter if somebody's 74, if somebody's 24, tomorrow is promised to no one. And the reality is that's what takes all the pressure off, in my opinion, is if you can just focus on, okay, what am I doing today? Last week, on the recording that I put out there last week, I talked about breaking stuff down, not to a daily basis, but breaking it down to an hourly basis. And that is probably one of the greatest habits that I've ever created in my lifetime, because every hour that passes, once it's gone forever, and you never get it back. So here it is, we're at the latter part of a day. Okay, so it's 7:30 something Central Time, and there's only like 4.5 hours left in the day. You blink, and there goes your day. You blink, and it's gone. But the reality is, we can never forget about the fact that once that day is gone, you never get it back. It's gone forever. So the cool part is, again, that takes off all of the stress. That takes off all the anxiety. That takes off all the pressure because I know that every single day, and this is the point of where performance is measured, performance drastically improves. I don't care if it's an Olympian training for the Olympics, if it's a person who is just focusing on their personal best. Anytime you raise the bar and you stretch yourself to go to another level in anything, okay, there's always basically room for growth. But then when you break it down on an hourly basis, that's the point of where performance is measured, performance drastically improves. You could break it down. And if I have a journal that's breaking down all 24 hours of a day, and I'm filling in, because I will literally log those hours starting at midnight all the way through. And then I want to make sure I'm writing something in those boxes, including rest, because people fail at that. The physical aspects of life are proper rest, proper diet, proper exercise. So, I mean, rest is still a component. This is something that you're trading time for, but it's critical to our success in every area of life, not just physical, mental too, focus, everything. So the reality is, it's very rewarding for me to be able to actually write down audio. Because if that's what I'm doing, audio applies to anything that I'm listening to on audible.com. That's an audio program. So it's right now I'm listening to a program on it's called the Ultimate Library of Self-Discipline. And it's got just a countless number of speakers who are the best in the industry at the subject. And the crazy part is there's times where I'll get wrapped up in doing stuff and I'll see there's only 5 minutes in an hour. I mentioned this last week. And because I see that, instead of saying I only have 5 minutes, I'm not even gonna bother starting, I'll throw it on. And all of a sudden I'll find myself hearing something and say, wow, that's critical. That's a pivotal point. Part of the program that I was going through today at one point, and I probably listened to it, I'd be willing to bet I've got at least 6 hours minimum total between Spanish studies and between audio programs. And I can do that while I'm doing other things. I just have the earpiece in and just listen to it. But this gentleman was talking about the money part of life, okay, the financial aspects. And this is critical because I want you to think not just how it applies to you, but how it applies to people that you know, is ultimately you should live on 70% of your income, 70%. And just to break down the top 20%, 10% should be ultimately in a cash reserve. And I've got what I considered a just phenomenal overview of the importance and significance of having some type of cash reserve. But 10% of the money every single day, it's paying yourself first. That's been taught for 2,000 years. And then you take 10%. This is a stretch for a lot of people. Take 10%, pay yourself first in cash, stays in cash, never leaves cash, and 10% is invested. And that's the beautiful thing, is because anybody who's on this call is most likely studying an industry where you can make your money work for you, but you can do what takes other people 40 to 50 years to accomplish. You can accomplish in 12 to 24 months. It's absolutely possible if you manage proper risk management and also manage patience and expectations. But the cool part is, in the core message of what I want to get through today, is ultimately I rewrite this every single day in Spanish, and it says, ya existe. Ya, the word ya, Y-A, stands for already, okay? It already exists. So existe is exists, obviously. So, and I think people take that for granted. If you take a physical goal, I don't care if it's a home, I don't care if it's a vehicle, or if it's a financial goal, and if you truly, get this, you have to understand this. If you allow yourself to accept the fact that, I know you have heard this before, it already exists. It already exists. If you accept the fact that it already exists, that is going to impact and affect the decisions and the actions and the habits that you create every single day of your life. You know, because the greatest obstacle to success in adult life is fear of failure. But yet that's a trick, because ultimately the only success anyone ever achieves worthwhile comes through a lot of failure, because failure ultimately is just results. You learn what works and what doesn't work. But this is the thing that I want to see people do, is ultimately write down in English, if you prefer, it already exists. It already exists. And you have to, it's critically important. You have to remind yourself of this every day. Because I can say it, you can know it, you can agree with it, you can understand it, but unless you're reminding yourself on a daily basis, you will forget. You're going to get wrapped up into reacting to everything in life. And it's like creating, if a person's goal is to have a net worth of $100 million, you should create $100 million habits. If a person's goal is to have $1 million, okay, now consider the average person makes $2 million in a lifetime. That's the average. I read that somewhere, but whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is, if a person wanted to build up $1 million net worth, then it would be smart to have $1 million habits. It's impossible, or next to impossible, to have $1 million habits if your mind is in a broke place. If a person's only focused on, how do I pay the bills? How do I do this? How do I do that? If their mindset is that of lack, it doesn't work that way. You ultimately have to accept the fact that you're already, just imagine if somebody gave you, a benefactor, somebody gave you a check for $1 million, okay? And you have it, you know they've got way more than that in the bank. So you know the check is good, but it's dated for 18 months from now. Okay, so you basically got to put it in a safe somewhere, some fireproof safe, and you don't get another one, you just get that one, but you got to wait 18 months to deposit that check. Okay, don't tell me that would not affect how you felt today, how you wake up in the morning, what would you do if money wasn't an issue? Because you already have it. Now, that doesn't mean you just go out and borrow a ton of money because you know you got money coming in. No, let's just assume you can't do that. Let's just assume that you know you have the money, you just don't get it yet. It's kind of like people that win the Powerball. One of the first books I ever wrote was called The $100 Million Question. Because imagine if a person wins the Powerball today, you know, because there's a drawing today, I believe. Anyways, a person wins a Powerball, that money's not in their bank account. It's not in their pocket. Okay, they've got to go through whatever process people go through when they play the lottery to get those funds. But I promise you that nothing would faze them. They would literally, unfortunately, most people, money is a great magnifying glass. It'll make a good person better and a bad person worse. So the great habits will come out, bad habits will come out. But ultimately, in the end, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the fact of you setting goals. And the financial goals, one of the best books, and I've suggested this before, is by a gentleman named Wallace Wattles. It's called The Science of Getting Rich. And he talks in this book, it was published probably 60, 70 years ago. He talks about the fact that everybody has a responsibility to get rich. Not only that, it's a sin not to get rich, because you can't do a lot of good in society and life and for mankind if a person is just broke every month. Ultimately, it's a responsibility, and that also changes the habits. All of a sudden, now a person's going to work smarter on a daily basis. And it's real easy to do this and still have a quality of life in terms of, especially if you realize that if you give what you do your full attention, doesn't matter what you're doing, if you live fully in the now, which by the way is one of my goals every single day, this gets written down, live fully in the now. Because your mind is always in the past or it's always in the future. But the moment that you can actually slow down, breathe in for 4, out for 4, it's called an alpha state in the brain. Okay. So ultimately, you just breathe in, you breathe out, you slow down, and you listen to the silence between the sounds. But this is a cool thing, is because of the fact that one of the greatest laws of life is you become the people you associate with in the books that you read. And it's staggering, like 58% of people never touch a book outside of high school. And out of the ones that read, that read, how much of that is fiction, how much is nonfiction? But it's kind of funny, because if you raise the bar, my goal before was to read like a minimum of 10 pages a day. I think everybody should have that goal. But then I raised it up. I take the pages of any book and I just divide it by 7 to complete a book a week. Bill Gates has habitually read a book a week for a long, long time. That's 50 books a year. And there is a limitless, you have to understand this. There are more books that are of value to you than you ever have time to read in your lifetime. So now the crazy part is, if I set the goal, okay, this is what my standard is. Remember, if you raise your standards, you raise your quality of life. If you raise your standards, you raise your quality of life. If you all of a sudden now allow yourself to put some Mozart in the background, maybe pour a glass of wine if you're into that kind of thing, or some red tea or some green tea, and just really enjoy the reading, and read it as if it was written for you personally, if that book was written for you, and then just absorb that information. There's not a day that goes by where you're not going to learn something. Your mind isn't going to be stretched to a whole nother level. And then the clarity and the growth, but it doesn't happen in 24 hours. It happens over a span of 12 to 24 months. 12 to 24 months, a person can completely transform their life. But yet, in the reality is, we all know that 95% of people will be exactly where they are today 5 years from now. 5 years from now, most people will be exactly where they are physically, financially, spiritually, mentally, socially, in every aspect of the word. So ultimately, again, the core message that I want to really drive home for today, because anybody who's new to this, is I keep my calls short, because I don't believe I need a ton of time to be able to pass on some thoughts or ideas. But the one takeaway, because I threw, just in the last 15 minutes, I've thrown really quite a few quotes in there, a couple what I call nuggets of just facts of life. And in the end, there's always one that I want to get delivered. And that one is, it already exists. If one person internalizes that and forces themselves to focus on that on a daily basis, if a person's goal is to run a marathon, and if you already accept the fact that you are already in shape to complete a marathon, all of a sudden now the stress comes off. You enjoy the process. Success is a journey, not the destination. I don't care if a person runs around the block, but then the next day adds up a little bit more, a little bit more. It affects your pace, it affects your breathing, it affects your heart rate. Everything is tied to it. So it isn't just financial, it's all these things. But ultimately, that's your takeaway for today. You write down, it already exists, and then it needs to be rewritten tomorrow. Okay, because in the end, tomorrow doesn't exist. Tomorrow is just going to be today all over again. But that needs to be rewritten. Every single day, it has to be reminded, just like gratitude, just like brushing the teeth, just like the gratitude, just like the goals. But you have to put the goals in the context of the present tense. Bob Proctor was probably one of the best teachers of talking about that. I am happy and grateful now that I have fill in the blank. Okay, that's what you do. And then you have to feel it. You have to internalize it. It totally changes your state. And people will all of a sudden say, what changed with you? You've got like a bounce in your step. You've got a vibe around you or whatever else. People will pick up on that. Okay. But it comes down to managing that today, managing the fact that it already exists. So in the end, I think the financial area is one of the most important areas to get together, because if a person gets their financial life in order, realistically, they can set up a lifestyle where they're working 4 hours a week. Okay. There's a book called The 4 Hour Work Week, Timothy Ferriss. Great book, read it a couple times. But the point is, that's what life should be. And then the rest of the time, there's no way you wouldn't commit a large amount of time to personal development, to audio programs, foreign language studies, reading, and actually enjoying the process. It's not going to feel like, oh, I have to do this. That's one of the other things I write down every single day. Every single day, I write down because you can. That one should be written down daily because you can. Anytime you're thinking, should I do this? Because you can. You can. Other people can't. And then you also have to write down you get to. That's a mindset change. So ultimately, you get to. So a person said, I don't feel like going to work. Say, you get to go to work. There's people that don't have work ethic. There's people that don't have jobs. There's people that don't want to go get jobs. So the fact that you have a job or a person's working, they get to. Same thing with studying trading. If a person wants to study trading and they don't feel like it because they feel like it's work, then all of a sudden they got to say, well, you get to. You get to. Just the fact that a person has the self-discipline, has the goals, has the motivation, has the drive, that puts you in a position where you get to study this stuff. And then you don't all of a sudden learn everything in one day, just like a foreign language. Okay. You can't just all of a sudden start studying Polish today and have Polish conversations. So success is a journey, not a destination. That is probably one of the greatest all-time quotes of all time. Success is the journey, not the destination. Success is the journey, not the destination. Good question. I'm going to probably close on that thought, but if anybody has any other questions they want to throw up here real quick, I'll stay on for like another 30 seconds or so. But these things, I want to drive home this point. I'll never stop driving it home. These things, if you want to change your life, rewrite these things every day. You can go through my journal, and I have a bookshelf full of them. And you're going to see, because you can, you're going to see you get to. You're going to see gratitude. You're going to see goals, but you're also going to see existe. And for me, it gives me goosebumps. I mean, literally makes my hair stand up on my arms when I actually, because I feel it. And it eliminates all stress, because no matter what in life, you're going to take 3 steps forward, take a step back. Sometimes it feels like you take 1 step forward, take 4 steps back. But that's the key. That's where but this is all about consistency. And that's where the consistency comes from. The consistency comes from that, because then you don't look at the temporary results that you get and say, okay, this doesn't work, this sucks. Because if that was the case, nobody would know how to walk. They'd fall over and they just keep crawling around the rest of their life. And trust me, you'll see adults crawling around, but that's usually a bar time. That's not just how they get to work and how they go through life. But the reality is that's exactly what it is. So take those little bullet points, and for the next week, challenge yourself to put everything in the present tense. Again, this goes all the way back to Bob Proctor, and I promise you, it goes before his time too. You have to understand that what you want already exists. It's just up to your consistency that makes it manifest itself into reality. But you have to internalize it in your head that it's already there. You already have it. And then watch what happens. It'll change how a person structures their day. It'll also change their peace of mind. It'll change everything in their life. And the cool thing is, to close on this thought, and I'll never stop saying this, is we all have the potential of 100 lifetimes. You know, when I look back over stuff that I've done in my life, and it's like more than most people will do in 5 lifetimes, and I haven't done nothing yet. I really haven't. I'm just beginning. That's why I love Sinatra's "The Best Is Yet to Come." It's one of my all-time favorite songs, one of my all-time favorite quotes. But today, I just want to leave you with that thought. If anybody has any questions, throw it out there. If not, I'm going to sign off. But in the end, it just really boils down to the one takeaway. The one focus is everything you want. Ask yourself, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? What would you do if success was guaranteed? And then follow that with the statement that it already exists. And then breathe. Just slow down and breathe, and just break down your day and take it 1 hour at a time. And then still, you can still allow yourself to go out, still allow yourself to, play and just balance life out, because it is important to have some balance in life. So on that note, I really respect everybody being on this call. Appreciate your time. If anybody has any questions, maybe if Greg is on here still, if you want to throw that on the chat as far as the YouTube, because I don't really know how to do that kind of stuff. I'm old, but I appreciate everybody's time. I have a lot of respect. It's just ultimately, like I said, this is once a week, and I try to shoot for about 20 minutes. That's normally my target. That's it per week. I mean, 20 minutes a week. And trust me, I have got so many hours logged into this stuff. It's immeasurable. So I really appreciate and respect everybody here. It's really cool that we have a platform where we can reach people in multiple states and just be able to connect, even if it's just short. I think back to the old days where we had to go to conventions and seminars, which are still beneficial. Those are priceless because it puts you in a different environment. It creates what's called a momentum zone. But in the end, we can do this on these calls, and people can just literally take some notes, get some thoughts or ideas, and then plug in the next week. Thanks, Greg. Greg put that in the chat. There's that thing. If anybody hasn't tied into that, once this is done, I end it, and then I take a little bit of time and I transfer to the YouTube channel. But Outside of that, I'm basically done. Just remember, it already exists. There's one core thought you need to get out of every single call. And of course, I'm always going to add on to it. And you're going to get a bit of duplication because it's just how I live my life. And that's how anybody does who accomplishes success. But the reality is we sell ourselves short so much. We all have challenges. We all have adversities. We all have stuff in life it's almost distractions, but it's also life. So you got to balance it all out. So again, thanks everybody. I'm going to close out the call and I will talk to you all next week. Take care.